Welcome to Thursday on the Pagan Perspective. I'm your Thursday host, Yeka, and this week we're talking about the difference between folk and ceremonial magic. First off, happy 7th year. We're going into our 7th year as a channel, the Pagan Perspective. And so this month, the regular hosts are going to do 2 topics, and then the rest of the month is actually going to be the subs. So our topic comes from a viewer called Blackheart, and they write, I am very into the practice of folk magic, but I'm not very well versed in practicing ceremonial magic. Living in a college dorm room, as I do at the moment, it is hard for me to get into ceremonial magic, but I think that I am limiting myself by only practicing folk magic. How would you guys recommend I get into practicing ceremonial magic? So the first thing to do here, which is how I really approach most issues, is defining terms. And what one person means by folk magic versus ceremonial magic could be different. When I read that, what I interpret it as folk magic being more connected to what you're doing in your daily life, your normal everyday life. Whereas ceremonial magic is, you have to create more of a space for it. There's a lot more steps. It's often from a very specific tradition, not always, but, and so you have to really separate and create new space for it. So the way I see the difference is your everyday life, your mundane, regular, versus this time that you separate out. And as I also mentioned, it seems like there's some very specific traditions. You could have ceremonial magic that comes from one group versus another, and the same for folk. We often talk about folk being the from specific cultures. So that's my take on what that difference is. And so if you're looking to involve more ceremonial magic in your practice, it's really going to depend on which ceremonial magic. If you're going simply by taking more time and more space, I think that's very simple to do without being in your roommate's space, and to expand this to other viewers, without being in whoever else's space. Or we often have questions about folks who live in situations where they have somebody else in the household who is very uncomfortable with the idea of paganism, who doesn't understand it, or even if they do understand, is threatened by it. So my advice often in those sorts of circumstances, which would be very similar to this one, is to skip on some of the visual tools being used and look at the other elements to it. So if that is an issue for you, that your roommate is not accepting, or maybe you just don't have the physical location to do this, to consider looking at the other elements. What are you really trying to do with the ceremony? What are you trying to communicate? And are there ways of doing that that don't use the specific symbols or tools, the physical ones that are called for? If it's a matter of not having the time, that gets down to more of a time management thing, which, not being in your life, not being part of your life, I can't really give much advice to that. But if it's an issue of just not feeling like you're safe in that space, you can try a different space. You can really look for a time period, perhaps, that the roommate is gone, or that sort of thing. So really, without knowing your exact situation, without knowing what these terms mean to you, that's about what I can say. And to encourage you to do your thing and explore and see where it takes you. So thank you. See you guys next week. And everybody, viewers, do you have any comments, questions? Do you have a take on what folk for ceremonial magic is? And if so, let us know in the comments below. And again, see you next week.